In the heart of a dying empire, beneath the steel bones of Nova Bastion, a single spark defied an entire race. This is the story of a battle-scarred human, a fugitive born of two worlds, and the impossible bond that could reshape the stars themselves. If you think you've seen it all, think again. What unfolds will test loyalty, ignite rebellion, and defy destiny. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, please leave a like, a share, and subscribe. Your support fuels every story we dare to imagine. Nova Bastion was a fortress like no other, a monolith of blackened steel and crimson banners floating on the edge of forgotten space. Once a military outpost, it had evolved into something far more grotesque, a glittering city of indulgence and cruelty, where the ruling Valance celebrated their dominance. Towering arenas carved into the heart of the station pulsed with life, and tonight, the blood games would claim another soul. Jason Cole adjusted the welding tool in his hand, cursing under his breath as he crouched inside a maintenance tunnel overlooking the grand arena. His uniform, standard-issue gray, hung loose on his frame, stained with old grease and ash. He was just another Earth-born maintenance tech, overlooked by the Valanth, barely acknowledged by the crowds. That was exactly how he liked it. Through the grates above, Jason could hear the crowd gathering, their anticipation crackling in the recycled air. He glanced up, catching flashes of the arena's floor illuminated by brutal spotlights. Sweat stung his eyes. But it was not just the heat that unsettled him tonight. There was a heaviness in the air, a thick tension that clung to the metal walls like a living thing. Then the drums began. The ground beneath him thrummed with every beat. Massive holographic screens displayed the arena for those too far to see. Jason caught a glimpse. Hundreds of Valanth nobles, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming, perched in private balconies. Around them, countless spectators, subjugated species, mercenaries, thrill-seekers cheered or watched in grim silence. From the far side of the arena, a figure was dragged into the center. Jason froze, one hand still gripping the worn handle of his tool. It was a girl, slender, barefoot, bound at the wrists, with shimmering energy manacles. Her skin, a soft iridescent hue that shifted faintly with the light, marked her as something alien, something rare. Her long hair hung tangled over her shoulders, and her clothes, little more than tattered rags, clung stubbornly to her frame. But it was her eyes that rooted Jason to the spot. Deep violet, almost black, they swept across the arena without fear, without pleading. She did not lower her gaze. Even as the monstrous cheers rose around her, there was no surrender in her stance, only defiance, carved into every line of her face. Arya Solon, the announcer's voice boomed, her words twisting through the air in multiple tongues. Last of the Solon line, traitor. Key to forbidden knowledge. The crowd erupted again, a sea of sound that battered the walls of the station. Jason's gut twisted. He should have looked away. He should have focused on his work, on his meaningless task of fixing a leaking conduit in a dying station. But he couldn't. His mind flashed unbidden to another time, another face, his sister, small and brave, standing in front of soldiers who had no mercy. The announcer's voice rose, triumphant. Arya Solon shall be offered to the Dreadmaw, and the Empire shall be cleansed of her taint. The gates at the end of the arena rumbled ominously. Jason felt it even through the floor. A heavy metallic groan filled the air, and from the darkness beyond, the Dreadmaw emerged. It was a nightmare given flesh, a creature that should not exist, towering twice the height of a man. Its armored body was a grotesque blend of reptilian and insectoid horror. Its maw split open vertically, revealing rows of dripping, needle-like teeth. Its scent, even from where Jason crouched, was foul like rust and decay and the deep, wet rot of abandoned places. The crowd went wild, stamping feet and clashing weapons against the railings. Jason's heart hammered against his ribs. This was not his fight. He had no business interfering, yet he moved without thinking. His hand darted into the inner pocket of his coveralls, retrieving a battered device no larger than his palm. Illegal, forgotten tech from a war no one spoke about. He thumbed the activation switch, and a low hum pulsed against his skin. Jason kicked open a nearby service hatch, stepping into the chaos. No one noticed him at first. He was just a smear against the backdrop of madness. He sprinted toward the perimeter of the arena, slipping through the blind spots between security drones. The Dreadmaw lumbered forward, every footstep shaking the ground. Arya stood in its path, still unflinching, still proud, though the creature's breath curled around her like the promise of death. Jason aimed the device and fired. A pulse of invisible energy burst outward, striking the Dreadmaw mid-charge. The beast staggered, screeched, its armored plates sparking as its internal systems spasmed violently. The effect was temporary. He knew it would recover, but it was enough. In the heartbeat of confusion, Jason crossed the last few yards to Arya. He reached her, slamming the plasma cutter against the locks on her restraints. Blue sparks erupted. The manacles flickered, then shattered. "Run," he barked. For a moment, she just stared at him, bewildered, stunned by the sheer absurdity of what was happening. Then, understanding flashed across her face. She nodded once. Sharply, they bolted, slipping into a service corridor just as the Dreadmaw roared in rage, and the Valanth guards realized something had gone terribly wrong. Blaster fire rang out behind them, scorching the air. Jason didn't look back. He just ran, adrenaline burning through his veins, heart hammering harder than it had in years. Somewhere deep inside him, a voice whispered that this was madness, that he had just thrown away his anonymity, his safety, maybe even his life for a stranger. But another voice, older, more stubborn, drowned it out. He remembered the day he had failed to save his sister. He remembered the helplessness, the regret that had haunted him ever since. Not this time. Never again. And as the alarms blared across Nova Bastion, echoing through the endless corridors, Jason Cole tightened his grip on the strange girl's hand and plunged deeper into the station's heart, toward a fate neither of them could yet imagine. The lower levels of Nova Bastion were a world apart from the glittering arenas above. Here, the air was thick with smoke, oil, and desperation. Cramped tunnels twisted into endless mazes, lined with flickering neon signs advertising black market wares, illegal tech, and pleasures best left unspoken. Jason pulled Arya close as they moved through the chaos, keeping their heads low among the shifting crowds. Around them, the station buzzed with rumor and tension. Word of the arena incident had already spread, distorted by fear and excitement. Whispers of rebellion, of a stolen prize, traveled faster than the alarms. Jason knew it was only a matter of time before security forces flooded the lower districts. Arya stumbled slightly, unused to the crush of bodies, but Jason caught her elbow without thinking. She was lighter than she looked, and he realized again how fragile she seemed in a place built for monsters. They ducked into a narrow alleyway, steam venting from broken pipes overhead. Jason scanned their surroundings, his instincts on high alert. He needed options. Fast. Just ahead, a shadow peeled away from the wall, a figure wrapped in a battered flight jacket, one hand casually resting near the weapon on his hip. Jason tensed, ready for another fight. Instead, the man grinned. Well, Jason Cole. Never thought I'd see your ugly mug again, Jason exhaled sharply. Vance Merrick. You still breathing? Mostly, Vance replied, glancing at Arya with raised eyebrows. You've picked up some interesting company, no time. Jason snapped. We need a way out. Now, Vance's grin faded. He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. Come with me. I know someone who knows the underbelly better than anyone. They followed Vance through a maze of side passages, avoiding the main thoroughfares. The noise of pursuit grew louder behind them, heavily armored Valanth patrols, sweeping through the lower levels with brutal efficiency. Eventually, they reached a grimy alcove where a small figure perched atop a pile of scrap metal, swinging her legs idly. She looked barely 12, with teal skin and large, alert eyes that missed nothing. Tala, Vance called out, got a job for you. The girl hopped down nimbly, eyeing Jason and Arya with suspicion. Who's the shiny one? She asked. nodding toward Arya. None of your business, Jason said. We need a fast route to Sector 12, Tala snorted. Fast costs extra. Jason dug into his pocket, fishing out a handful of credit chips. This buys your silence too. Tala's grin was all teeth. Deal. Follow me, and try not to get dead. Without another word, she darted into a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for one person. Jason exchanged a look with Vance before pushing Arya forward and following close behind. The tunnels Tala led them through were ancient, part of Nova Bastion's original construction, long since abandoned by the station's current rulers. They crawled over broken conduits and ducked beneath sagging beams, moving in silence except for the occasional curse when someone banged a knee or slipped. Above them, the loudspeakers crackled to life, broadcasting Captain Droven's voice. Attention citizens, harboring fugitives is an act of treason. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance ensures death. Jason gritted his teeth. Droven was not bluffing. The Valanth did not negotiate. They exterminated. Tala paused at an intersection, pressing a small scanner against the wall. Bad news, she whispered. They're sweeping with neuroscanners. They'll pick up anything. Unusual, Jason glanced at Arya, whose faint luminescence had dimmed but was still visible. If one knew what to look for, they're looking for her, Vance muttered. No kidding, Jason thought grimly. He scanned the nearby pathways. One route led toward the market district, a chaotic maze that might slow the patrols. Another plunged deeper into maintenance shafts, more direct but dangerously narrow. The choice was made for them when a patrol rounded the corner ahead, shouting orders. Move! Jason barked. They sprinted toward the market, weaving through the crowds. Vendors shrieked as carts overturned. People scattered, terrified of getting caught in the crossfire. Energy blasts hissed past them, scorching walls and shattering signs. Tala zipped ahead like a wraith, guiding them through the shifting maze. Jason kept one hand on Arya's wrist, refusing to let her fall behind. Vance covered their rear, his old instincts kicking in as he fired short, controlled bursts to keep the pursuers at bay. They almost made it. At the edge of the market, the patrol caught up. A group of Valanth soldiers closed in, their weapons gleaming under the flickering lights. Jason spotted Vance hesitating, pinned down behind a pile of crates, cut off from the rest of them. Without thinking, Jason shoved Arya and Tala toward a side passage. Go, he shouted. I'll get him. Arya caught his arm, her violet eyes wide. For a moment, Jason saw the plea there, not fear for herself, but for him. He shook her off gently. Trust me. Jason turned back, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. He reached Vance just as a soldier raised his weapon. Jason tackled him, slamming the enemy into the ground. He grabbed Vance by the jacket, hauling him upright. You still owe me drinks, Jason growled. Vance barked a ragged laugh. You're insane. Wouldn't be the first time. They sprinted after Tala and Arya, ducking into a narrow maintenance shaft, just as more patrols flooded the market behind them. Panting, bruised but alive, they regrouped in the shadowed confines of a forgotten access corridor. Tala leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You're lucky I'm a genius, she said smugly. Jason ignored her, turning to Arya. She was watching him differently now, something softer in her gaze. Not just gratitude, but belief. He wasn't just another human mechanic anymore. He was someone she could trust. Vance wiped blood from a cut above his eye. We can't keep running like this. They'll box us in, Jason nodded grimly. We need a way out of this station. Tala tapped her chin thoughtfully. Maybe? There's an old maintenance dock near the core. If you're crazy enough, Jason turned to Arya. You said, a way, something hidden. Arya nodded, determination hardening her features. There is, but we'll have to be fast. And brave. Jason cracked a grim smile. Good thing we're both. The group exchanged a look. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. Their survival, and maybe something much bigger, depended on what they would do next. And somewhere deep in the labyrinthine heart of Nova Bastion, a door long forgotten waited to be found, the abandoned energy station, where they found refuge. was a skeleton of what it once had been. Rusted beams crisscrossed overhead, tangled wires dangled like dead vines, and the floor was littered with cracked panels and pools of stagnant water. The only light came from Jason's handheld scanner, casting long, wavering shadows across the ruined walls. Jason adjusted a broken ventilation grill to block the entrance behind them. It would not stop a determined search party, but it might buy them a few minutes if the Valanth came knocking. He dropped to a sitting position against a cracked bulkhead, his muscles aching from hours of running and fighting. Arya sank down across from him, drawing her knees to her chest, her arms wrapped around them protectively. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the quiet of survivors who knew they could not afford to waste energy on small talk. Finally, Jason broke the silence. "You're not just some random prisoner," he said, his voice low, rough. "They wouldn't throw half the station after you if you were." Arya's gaze flickered upward, meeting his across the gloom. Her violet eyes were unreadable for a moment, then softened. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not." Jason waited, giving her space to decide how much to reveal. He knew what it was like to have secrets too heavy to carry, and yet too dangerous to share. "My name is Arya Solon," she said, her voice steady despite the rawness in her eyes. "I am a Keyborn." Jason frowned. The term was unfamiliar, but something about it made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. "A Keyborn is a child born from two worlds," Arya continued. "One parent from the ancient Solari, the other from the humans who settled these stars long ago. I carry genetic codes that can interface with technology left behind by civilizations older than any empire that stands today." Jason exhaled slowly, trying to wrap his head around the implications. "So, you're a living access code?" Arya gave a small, humorless smile. "In a way, yes. My blood, my neural patterns, they are the keys to ships, weapons, systems the Valanth could never unlock on their own. And if they get you..." Jason trailed off, already knowing the answer. "If they get me," Arya said, "they'll control systems powerful enough to dominate not just this station, but entire sectors of space. Entire civilizations." Jason ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of what she had just entrusted him with. He had stumbled into something much bigger than he could have imagined, something that could tilt the balance of power across the galaxy. He looked at her again, really looked. She was young, maybe only a few years younger than him, yet there was a gravity to her that went far beyond her age, a quiet resilience that spoke of years spent hiding, running, surviving. "They killed my parents when I was still a child," Arya said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They thought if they destroyed the bloodline, the knowledge would die with us. But my mother was clever. She encoded what she knew into me. Memories, instincts, skills all buried in my DNA. All waiting for the right moment to surface." Jason felt something shift inside him. A deep ache he hadn't let himself feel for a long time. "I know what it's like," he said after a moment, "to lose everything because someone decided you were a threat." Arya tilted her head slightly, curiosity flickering across her features. "I was military," Jason said, his voice growing rough. "Special recon unit. We were assigned to gather intelligence on Valanth operations. Someone on our side sold us out. I watched my entire team die. Because of it, they erased me from the records. Dead men can't contradict official stories." He chuckled bitterly. "A hollow sound in the dead station. I've been hiding ever since. Fixing pipes, patching walls, pretending I don't exist." Arya's expression softened, a rare vulnerability passing over her face. In that moment, they were no longer fugitives from different worlds. They were simply two broken souls who had been betrayed by the systems meant to protect them. "You saved me," she said quietly. Jason shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing to do." "It was more than that," Arya said. "You chose to stand against them. You chose to fight." Jason met her gaze, the weight of unspoken truths passing between them. In the broken remains of the station, under the flickering light, a bond was forming, one built not on obligation or desperation, but on something much stronger: trust. Arya shifted, reaching into the folds of her ragged tunic. She withdrew a small, metallic device, no larger than a coin, engraved with intricate symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. "There's a ship," she said, hidden deep within Nova Bastion's core. "It's called the Ardent Star. It's one of the last relics of the old Solari fleet. If we can reach it, we can escape, maybe even fight back." Jason leaned forward, studying the device. "You sure it still works?" Arya smiled, and for the first time it was a real smile, touched with hope. "It's built to last centuries. It's bonded to my genetic signature. As long as I'm alive, it'll respond." Jason straightened, feeling energy surge back into his exhausted limbs. He wasn't sure what kind of future waited for them beyond Nova Bastion, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to let her face it alone. "Then we find it," he said, "no matter what it takes." Outside, the distant wail of alarms echoed through the station's bones, a reminder that time was slipping through their fingers. Jason and Arya rose together, battered but unbroken, and began moving toward the heart of the station, toward their only chance at freedom. The corridors leading to Nova Bastion's core were a different kind of battlefield. Here, everything was sleek, polished, and mercilessly efficient. Walls gleamed with reinforced alloys. Surveillance nodes hovered silently in the corners, scanning every shadow. Armed guards in black and crimson armor moved with mechanical precision, their weapons gleaming under the harsh strip lights. Jason adjusted the stiff collar of his stolen maintenance uniform, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the fabricated ID badge clipped to his chest. Beside him, Arya walked with her head lowered, a battered toolbox clutched in her hands. Their cover was thin, at best 2 maintenance workers, assigned to recalibrate the central coolant systems. A lie, stitched together in haste and desperation. In his ear, Vance's voice crackled through the comm link. "Guards shifting in 30 seconds. North Junction's blind spot is your window. Move fast. Stay boring." Jason grunted an acknowledgement, resisting the urge to look up at the surveillance cameras tracking every inch of the hall. He tightened his grip on the sonic wrench tucked into his belt, a tool that could double as a makeshift weapon if things went sideways. They passed through the first checkpoint without incident, swiping their forged credentials through the access ports. A pair of Valanth officers barely glanced at them, more interested in complaining about the long shifts and the strange disruptions reported near the upper arenas. Jason caught Arya's eye briefly. They moved in perfect sync, blending into the background noise of Nova Bastion's endless machine. As they neared the restricted access gate, Jason murmured under his breath, "Final checkpoint. Once we're through, we're on our own." Arya gave the slightest nod, her expression unreadable beneath the shadow of her helmet. Jason stepped up to the final security terminal, trying to keep his breathing steady. He placed the forged badge against the scanner. The machine beeped, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then blinked green. The heavy doors slid open with a hiss. They slipped inside. The inner core was eerily quiet compared to the chaos of the outer station. Massive power conduits ran along the walls, pulsing with a faint blue glow. The air was heavy with the thrum of energy, surging toward the heart of Nova Bastion. Jason led Arya down a side corridor, following the path Vance had mapped out. According to the plan, they had 15 minutes to reach the concealed docking bay before the next patrol sweep. The comlink crackled again. "You're almost there," Vance's voice said. "Exit shaft 27. Old maintenance dock behind the fusion regulators." Jason smiled grimly. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. But then the comlink hissed with static and a new voice broke through. "Captain Droven, Jason Cole, Arya Solon, you are surrounded. Surrender now, and you might be shown mercy." Jason froze. From both ends of the corridor, Valanth troops emerged, weapons raised, armor gleaming under the cold lights. They moved in perfect formation, cutting off all escape routes. Jason's heart sank. It wasn't just bad luck. Someone had given them up. The comlink crackled once more, and Jason heard it, the rough breathing, the broken voice. "I'm sorry," Vance whispered. "They caught me. I had no choice." Jason closed his eyes for a brief second, the weight of betrayal sinking into his bones. He wanted to hate Vance, wanted to rage at him for destroying their only chance. But he couldn't. He understood too well what fear could make a man do. Arya tensed beside him, ready to fight, ready to run. Jason placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Follow my lead," he said softly. In a single, fluid motion, Jason pulled the sonic wrench from his belt and hurled it with deadly precision at the nearest overhead conduit. Sparks exploded as the impact shorted out the lighting grid, plunging the corridor into darkness. Chaos erupted. Jason grabbed Arya's hand and yanked her into the nearest maintenance shaft. Energy bolts sizzled past them, scorching the walls. Alarms blared, the sound almost deafening in the enclosed space. They sprinted through the dark, guided only by memory and desperation. Somehow, miraculously, they reached the hidden access point, an old, rusted hatch partially concealed behind a decommissioned power relay. Jason ripped it open, shoving Arya inside first. Before diving in after her, they tumbled into a wide, dimly lit chamber. At the center of the space, cradled in docking clamps older than the station itself, rested a sleek vessel of ancient design. Its hull shimmered faintly, alive with dormant energy patterns. The Ardent Star. Jason barely had time to register the ship before he heard the pounding footsteps behind them. He spun around, drawing the compact plasma pistol hidden in his tool belt. Arya knelt at the base of the Ardent Star, her hands already moving over the activation panel, her fingers glowing faintly as the ship responded to her touch. Outside the bay doors, the heavy boom of soldiers assembling echoed through the station's bones. Hundreds of them. Jason's grip tightened on his weapon. He glanced at Arya, who looked back at him with fierce determination. There was no way out but through, and Jason was prepared to fight every last one of them if it meant giving Arya enough time to get that ship into the air. He planted his feet, raised his weapon, and faced the door as it began to groan open under the pressure of incoming forces. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a war for the future. The doors to the ancient docking bay buckled inward under the relentless assault. Jason stood alone between them and Arya, his pulse steady despite the odds. The plasma pistol in his hand felt heavier now, almost an extension of his will rather than a weapon. Behind him, Arya knelt at the base of the Ardent Star, her hands glowing brighter as the ship's ancient systems roared to life. Symbols and lights danced across its surface, responding to her touch. Reawakening from centuries of slumber, time was slipping away faster than breath. The first wave of Valanth troops surged through the opening, their armor glinting under the station's dying lights. Jason did not hesitate. He fired with sharp, controlled bursts, cutting down the leading soldiers before they could even raise their weapons. Sparks flew as energy bolts scorched the metal floor around him, the air thick with the scent of burnt ozone. More soldiers poured in, relentless, a tide of steel and rage. Jason moved like a force of nature, dodging, firing, striking with the desperate precision of a man who knew he had no second chances. Every step he took was a promise carved into the ground. She will get away. Pain bloomed suddenly in his side. An energy blast clipped him, spinning him to the floor. He gritted his teeth, tasting blood, and forced himself back to his feet. His left arm hung useless at his side, but he shifted the pistol to his right, raising it again with grim determination. He would not fall. Not yet. Behind him, the Ardent Star began to hum, its engines building power, the docking clamps straining against the sudden force. Arya's voice, clear and commanding, called out a final activation sequence in a language Jason did not recognize. The soldiers hesitated for a fraction of a second, unnerved by the ship's awakening. It was all the chance Arya needed. The bay lit up with a pulse of blinding energy. As the Ardent Star's defensive systems roared to life, ancient technology, infused with the power of the Keyborn, swept the chamber in a wave of force. Valanth soldiers were thrown backward like leaves in a hurricane, their weapons shredded, their armor crumpled. Arya stood in front of the ship now, her body wreathed in a soft, shimmering glow, her hair lifted slightly, caught in the unseen currents of energy radiating from her. Her eyes burned with a fierce light, No longer just a fugitive or a victim, she was something more. Something born to change the course of history. Jason staggered toward her, blood trailing down his side, his strength fading with every step. She caught him as he collapsed, her arm surprisingly strong. "You're insane," she whispered, tears gathering in the corners of her luminous eyes. Jason gave a ragged, breathless laugh. "Wherever you go," he gasped, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Point go to." Arya pressed her forehead gently against his, her tears falling freely now. She gripped his hand tightly, pouring into him all the strength, all the gratitude, all the fierce, stubborn hope that had carried her this far. "I won't leave you behind," she promised. With a surge of will, she half dragged, half carried him up the boarding ramp of the Ardent Star. The ship responded instantly to her presence, sealing the hatch behind them even as the surviving Valant forces scrambled to regroup. Jason slumped into one of the contoured chairs in the cockpit, his vision blurring at the edges. Through the haze of pain, he watched Arya move to the pilot's seat, her hands gliding over the control panels with instinctual precision. The Ardent Star shuddered once, twice, then broke free of its ancient moorings with a roar that shook the very bones of Nova Bastion. Outside, the station was coming apart. Fires raged through the upper levels, where earlier battles had torn holes in the structure. Debris floated like broken dreams in the blackness of space. The Ardent Star soared upward, slipping through the crumbling chaos with impossible grace. In the rear viewport, Nova Bastion shrank into the distance, a burning, collapsing relic of a cruel empire. Jason closed his eyes, exhaustion finally claiming him, but not before he felt the ship's acceleration smooth into the steady hum of escape. When he opened his eyes again, they were surrounded by stars, endless, glittering, silent stars. Arya sat beside him, her hand still holding his. "We're free," she said softly. Jason managed a faint, crooked smile. "For now, but not just to run anymore," she said, a fierce light in her voice. "We fight. For others like us. For freedom." Jason tightened his fingers around hers. "Then let's start," he whispered. Together, under the endless sweep of the universe, Jason and Arya turned the Ardent Star toward a future they would forge with their own hands, no longer fugitives, but warriors bound by fire, by loss, and by the unbreakable promise born that night among the stars.